much for joining for this session. I apologize for my my glasses, which are really good at protecting my eyes from the computer screen, but they're really bad at letting you see my eyes. So I apologize for that ahead of time. Let's start, as always, with a little centering. And what I'd like to do for our centering this morning or this afternoon, this evening, depending on your time zone, is I want to read that poem again that Joel shared this morning. Because it was I think it's a powerful poem, and there's some repetition in it that bears repeating. And I think it ties into an important kind of principle of almost every spiritual tradition. And that's that the state that we call in our everyday life being awake, that in the state that we call being awake, is spiritually we're actually asleep. And that you'll see in every tradition the exhortation to wake up, including in the Gospels. Stay awake, Jesus said in a couple of parables. When Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he told his friends, please stay awake. So let's read that poem again with that context. And so center yourself and feel your feet. I wake to the sleep. I wake to sleep. I wake to sleep. And take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. We think by feeling. What is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Of those so close beside me, which are you? God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. Light takes the tree, but who can tell us how? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Great nature has another thing to do to you and me, so take the lively air and lovely. Learn by going where to go. This shaking keeps me steady. This shaking keeps me steady, I should know. What falls away is always and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. Hope. Well, thanks for showing up, men, and I want to just make sure that someone can hear me. You guys can hear me out there, right? My name is Mike Anderer. I am live in Berkeley, California, and I'm a member or participate in the NorCal Male chapter of Illuman. I also am a recent addition to the board of Illuman, and I am also serve on the Illuman Development Council and the Futuring Council, which is what this workshop is about, some of the work of the Futuring Council. What I'd like to say as an introduction to this workshop is a reminder of the touchstones that you may have heard people speak about this in the past couple of days. Gathering, centering, releasing, and serving. There's one more besides releasing. Connecting. Thanks, Joe. And serving. So I want to say something about different ways to be of service within Illuman, and to put that in the context of the content of this workshop. If you come to the awakening that you would like to serve, that you want to be a man of service within Illuman, I break those into 3 different categories. You can be of service to a local chapter by getting connected to a local chapter. You can be of service to Illuman, let's call it Illuman National or Illuman International, by getting involved, by coming, by attending events like you're attending now and getting to know folks, potentially getting on to one of the leadership councils, and helping to hold the container for the larger group of men in our circle. Over 1,500 men have attended an MROP and been initiated in the past 8 years. So it's a growing community. This community gathering is a large community. There's another way to be of service as well, and that's to be of service to the organization of Illuman. And that's really to attend to and care for what I would call the body, what I call the body of Illuman, that I consider is like an individual person. And it takes attention and care in the same way that we need to do our own individual work. Illuman, as the body of Illuman, also needs to do its own inner work. And so this workshop is really an update, an informational update about some of the inner organizational work that Illuman is trying to do. Now, usually this work is shadow work. It happens in the dark. We don't really know where we're going. And so we're in that shadowy place where we're not really sure what we're doing. We don't really know. And so we've looked to a couple of guides to guide us in this process, and I'll be talking about that. So I wanted to give that little description of different ways to be of service to Illuman, and put this in context, that the Futuring Council is attempting to be in service to the body of Illuman and to our shadow work. I'm going to share my screen now for a little presentation. Okay, this is just the agenda that we're going to run through this week, the outcomes of this meeting, what we're doing with our guides for this process in the West in our own organizational shadow. We are open circle to individuals, Adam and Miriam. Miriam was actually part of our circle of women last night. She was held that circle. She held that space. She didn't share, but she was on the call. This is what hopefully you'll know by the end of this. You'll know the what and why of our work with Miriam and Adam. You'll be able to describe what the next phase 2 of the work that we're doing looks like. That you'll know how you could get involved in this work if you were interested in getting involved, and to respond to any questions or comments that you might have from the community. I just want to let you know right now that while I'm sharing my screen, I can't see the chat. So there will be some times when I'll jump out of the presentation and check to see any questions in the chat, but I can't see those questions right now. So, where are we? There may be men who are new to Illuman and our work in this workshop, so I want to give a quick arc of history. Father Richard Rohr started doing some significant research into men's work and men's spirituality in the late 80s and early 90s. You might remember that there was a series of significant books that came out in the 80s and late and early 90s that many of us might remember. The first MROP or men's retreat that he organized happened in the early 90s. Bob Juarez, who might be on this call, was at that retreat. The first experience that was called the Rites of Passage, I think may have been in 1996. And these were all happening as a program of the Center for Action and Contemplation. As we rounded into the 2000s, those experiences began to get some real traction. The Center for Action and Contemplation really focused on those as one of their priorities for the next 10 years. And those rites of initiation, men's rites of passage, really grew in popularity, and many of the men here at the workshop that you're listening to this weekend got involved at that time. About 2011, Father Richard decided that he was approaching the time where he needed to step back from the men's work, and he also thought that the Center for Action and Contemplation was going to start to focus on a couple of new priorities as he made the decision to stop traveling as much as he had been. So that was a process, organizational process. It took a couple of years. The end result of that was Illuman spun off of the Center for Action and Contemplation and formed as an organization in about 2012. So Illuman has existed independently from about 2012. So we have our own life cycle, and I will be honest to you that separation from Father Richard and the Center for Action and Contemplation was a traumatic birth to Illuman. And so we carry that trauma as an organization in the body of Illuman. And we are continuing to move through our life cycle. Everything moves through a cycle. Things are not linear. We think that they are linear. Things are in a circle, and we are moving through that circle right now. There are two major gatherings that Illuman does as an organization each year. This is one of them, Solarize. The other one is known as Oracle, that normally happens in March or April. And that's a gathering of the men who are, leaders in Illuman, or kind of rising leaders and rising elders, and raising leaders in the organization. So there's a group of about 100 men who are normally invited, have been invited to the most recent Oracle in 2020. In the past couple of Oracles, as we sat together in council, it became clear that there was some things happening within the body of Illuman that suggested that we were moving into a different phase in our life cycle. So at that time, that's when Terry Simmons-Butker, the chairperson of our board, engaged with Adam and Miriam. Adam was involved with Illuman from early on, back in 2014, and was one of our original trainers in the way of counsel, and helped bring counsel into Illuman. So they started a phase one a couple of years ago. I'm going to stop my sharing for a moment, and I'm going to show a video now. So if you haven't double-clicked on the video yet, please do that. So what this video is a description from, this is a picture of Adam. This is a description of how Adam describes the why of the work that he and Miriam are guiding Illuman in right now. So let's listen to Adam.
With a particular lens of power.
Hey, Mike, sorry to interrupt, but we're not able to get the audio from the video that you're playing at the moment.
Okay. Okay. Do you have a suggestion on the way that I can get the audio to?
Are you playing that from your local computer?
I am.
And you're sharing when you click share, you're clicking the audio button to do that?
I did not. Okay, that was what I missed.
Perfect. And you're getting a few questions in the chat too, just so you know.
Okay, good.
Putting this together, that we haven't really said why we're doing this, right? The big why. And I wanted to bring us back to Terry and my first conversation about this project about 2 years ago. And it was about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago maybe. And the conversation was really about bringing the transformational potential that from the programs, that happens in the programs, and the integrity of that work out in the world into the working of the organization itself, whether it's planning for programs or running, making board decisions or organizing groups around the country or potentially around the world. That the potential that actually the way that we do that, the way that you do that as Illuman, can be just as transformative, can be just as potent as the programs themselves, and to kind of bridge that gap between the work that happens out in the world and what happens within the working of the organization, the functioning of the organization.
All right. So that is really the big why. A couple of quick questions and responses. Adam and Miriam are principals in an organization known as We Are Open Circle, and they provide training and consultation and coaching to organizations that are seeking to be deliberately developmental organizations. They are highly skilled in group process. They both came from the Ojai Foundation and later the Way of Counsel, where they have lots of experience and training in group facilitation. Trying to see if there's any other questions. Yeah, the coffee was good, but the audio wasn't bad. Glad we got that fixed. I'm going to go back now to the presentation. And I appreciate everyone's patience as we kind of move through these technology items. So let me just talk about the life cycle of organizations and the model of a life cycle, organizational life cycle that we have used and that Adam and Miriam have applied, and that's really using the medicine wheel as a model. And so this is essentially the medicine wheel, and things in a medicine wheel, birth happens in the East. And you'll hear stories of our birth, and heard some of those yesterday in some of our workshops with Jim and Joel, for example, talking about some of those early oracle gatherings and solarized gatherings before there was even this national conference. And then after that founding inspiration, you move here to the South where you practice doing what you're doing. We've initiated over 1,000 men since the beginning of the organization. We've tried different things. We've added this national conference. We're still testing out new things and new ways of being. But eventually all organizations move into a questioning phase where friction starts to happen and questions are asked about who we are. And when this phase is moved through consciously and awake, you move to the north of, which is a place of integration, inclusion, and service. Now, the first phase of work that Miriam and Adam did, which ended back in July, they did an evaluation of, essentially placed us as an organization, in this wheel. And they gave a compelling narrative of where Illuman was and how we're behaving. And they said that indeed, as I think Terry had the suspicion back when he initiated the conversation with Adam a year and a half ago, that we're in the West, and the body of Illuman, while, as Adam said, is doing incredibly transformative work in our programs out in the world, we have our own internal, inside of our body, our own tensions and conflict that's taking place inside our body. And there's even some rebellion, and even some, I would almost say, suppression or loss, or there's parts of us that disappear. And they also said, which was really, I thought, insightful, is the tendency when you get to the West, that there's an unhealthy tendency to do one of two things. And one of them is called a polarity. It's to retreat back to the vision and intuition and emergence of the organization, and to have a pull back towards this. And so one of the responses, or one of the reactions, really is probably the better would be, is to really, when you hear talk about the initial spirit, and that is not necessarily a healthy response that moves towards the north and the king energy. It's a reaction that really takes us back. The other possible unhealthy response is to move towards the south, which is really the direction of the warrior, and it's the active place. It's the place of action. So in a certain sense, you could even say that all of the activity around the phase 2 of this engagement we're doing with Adam and Miriam is itself potentially unhealthy, in that there's so much activity involved in it. There's so much action. What they are inviting us to, and what we are I am inviting, the Futuring Council is inviting the body of Illuman to consider is to allow Adam and Miriam to guide us into the darkness, to be our guides, just as we are guides to men as they do their own rites of passage. They are asking us to allow them to be our guides as we move through this passage, they're calling it. And they're calling this west-north passage the gateway of forgiveness. And I think the questions in this passage that they presented to us, and I think even more than forgiveness, it's what needs to die, who or what needs to be forgiven, and how do we need to prepare for that death. And if we are able to make this passage well, we'll be in a healthy place of generative power, the generative man of the North, where we can put healthy structures and processes in place. We can get alignment on our aims and roles and know how we're making decisions and that kind of a thing. So that's the idea. I'm going to keep going because I'm conscious of time here and I want to leave some time for questions at the end. So we've just started last month phase 2 of our process, of this process where we want to move into this west-north passage. And this is what's happening in this phase 2. Miriam and Adam are helping to educate and train us in preparation for a west-north ceremony and for the decision-making processes that we'll need to determine the roles, aims, values, policies, and structures for Illuman as it moves into the next stage of its life cycle. It's really the next turn of its life cycle. This is a visual representation of what that looks like. The education and training of Illuman in preparation for its passage. So what I'd want to point out to you is that there are 2 elements to this, this transition. One is some literal technical training and education. So there are several workshops that are being facilitated, large group workshops, and then also a smaller facilitator workshop, where we're going to try to skill up and level up and increase the power fluency in among the men who are part of the body of Illuman. We're also going to do a council review and talk about different circle based processes for decision making that we can utilize as part of our council process. And then we're going to work with some of the creative tension that exists within the body of Illuman. And of course, this all begins first with an awareness that we even need this at all. The goal is to get up here where we can more clearly articulate the direction that we're moving in. And again, it's to bring the transformative work that we do in the world inside the body of the organization as well. To bring the transformative work that we're already doing in the world and also operate as an organization in the same way. These are the cycles that are going to take place over the next 8 months, that they're going to go through different themes. Collective wisdom, counsel and power. Cycle 2 will be conflict. Cycle 3 will be structures and forms for decision making. And cycle 4 is going to be about radical inclusion, which of course we're already doing some of our own personal inner work this weekend on our own advancement in the area of inclusion. There are basically 3 elements to the work that Adam and Miriam are guiding us in. There are large group trainings, there'll be 4 of them. They're 11:30 to 5 Eastern time, and they are open trainings to men in the body of Illuman. And if you are currently not on the email list that is getting invitations to these trainings, please reach out to your local chapter, or I'll leave my email address in the chat at the end of this, and reach out to me directly. And if you are engaged with your local chapter, interested in becoming more involved in Illuman, let's explore whether or not you'd like to participate in those large group trainings. The second is technical trainings for a small group of facilitators. And when we say a small group, it's a small group. It's only about 16 men. Participation in this is by nomination, and about half of the men are coming from our body of conveners and from our local chapters. And then the other half are going to be nominated from our different councils. Councils like the Wisdom Elders, the Development Council, the Futuring Council, the Board, the Governance Council, all the different councils that we have. We call them councils instead of committees. And then Adam and Miriam are going to be do some regular kind of coaching and consulting with individuals in the body of Illuman and with council groups when they're invited into those council groups. A little bit of detail on the training, on the facilitator training program. So that's the small group training. The purpose of that is to develop a cohesive, diverse, and regenerative community and organizational culture in Illuman by upskilling a diverse group of men across the network in a variety of applicable forms of group facilitation, conflict, decision-making, and vision. As I said before, the ultimate outcome is really to get beyond the gateway of forgiveness and to get to these things, clarify our collective aims, clarify our roles and policies, and create a deliberately developmental organization. And as I said at the very beginning, there are 3 types of service to Illuman. And you want to make sure that you get involved in the type of service that gives you life. There is service to your local chapter where you're trying to reach more men and bring them into the community of Illuman. There is service to the national program of Illuman to get involved in the program council, to come to national events, to be connected here. And then the third form of service is service to the body of Illuman, to serve on one of our leadership councils, the board, the wisdom elders, the conveners, and to attend to some of this of the organizational life of Illuman. How can you participate? Should be a little bit clear at this point. Participate in the 4 large group training sessions. The first one has already happened. You can engage with one of the Illuman councils, the wisdom elders, board of directors. Nominations are almost always open. Participate in the nomination process for the facilitator training program. Again, you'd already have to be part of one of those groups that I mentioned. That reference to an email is from an early, is not for this workshop. Same thing with that next one. But you can also engage with the online learning in this process. And I'm gonna stop my share a second time and take you back. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't stop my screen share, apparently. Okay, there we go. And I want to share with you another another resource that we're using in this process, again, to engage as many people as possible in this, even if you can't attend a training. So Illuman has recently stepped into using an online learning management system. You'll see a couple of different things here. But you can join the inviting a third way circle here, and all of the trainings, the large group trainings, the facilitator trainings, are all reserved and kept here on this site. And so one of the things that I would do if you got involved and interested, and you haven't already received an email invitation to this Sutra circle, I can send that to you. Over here, it's easy to navigate. Preparation meetings and materials. These are all of the things that already happened. A July presentation by Adam and Miriam that's really important to take a look at. An information meeting on September 12th that I facilitated that's similar to what you're listening to today. Adam and Miriam did a training, an information meeting on the facilitator training program in September. Here's some general discussion and questions. There's an opportunity to engage with brothers here in a chat room. And all of the large group trainings are also going to be posted here. So if you missed a large group training, say you missed the first one on October 3rd, well, you can come here and there's a video of the entire training here. There's also a PDF of the presentation, related readings, the reading that was used at the centering is all available here. So if you already missed the first one, it's okay, you can get that information here. When the facilitator training program starts, there'll be another circle that'll show up here for those participants. And again, the same idea, you'll be able to get the resources and have a chat room, discussion board for the brothers that are part of that there as well. So that's a place that you'll be able to engage in this process as well. Again, we're trying to engage as many brothers as possible in this process. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any questions. So I'm checking the chat room now. So to respond to Juan, your question, the phase one of the work with Adam and Miriam was really about the assessment, where they really just listened. They did kind of individual interviews and they were observer participants in several different council meetings. So that presentation that said preparation, meetings and materials, and the July presentation that I mentioned is their assessment presentation. So I would encourage you to look back there. So Tony, you asked who makes the recommendations for those who can attend the process. I'll tell you this, this is one of the signs that we're in the West, is one of the repeating questions at Oracle and Solarize is that we hear is how do you become a member of a council? How did that person get there? Who gets recommended? How did that happen? And for those of us who are on the inside or who have been around for a while, we feel like it's very obvious. But for those who have not been around for a while, it's unclear. And it seems a little fuzzy and it seems to happen in the dark. So what we're trying to do in this process is to try to communicate more about it, which is why I'm doing this workshop, and also to be as open as possible. So we really want to welcome as many men as possible into those large group trainings. So I'm going to leave my email address here in the chat. And if you are interested, please reach out to me. Let me know what local chapter you're part of, and we can get you in there. I would I would point out, though, that those 3 types of service to the organization that you can get involved in, and this is for people who want to get involved in that 3rd type of service that I mentioned, service to the organization as an organization, to the body of Illumin. It's not direct service in the world, in the transformation of other men. It's our own inner organizational work. So if you're interested in that, come on to the large group trainings. The 3rd way is an allusion to a metaphor that's probably a little confusing, but I think we should define. The 3rd way is really because there's several different connotations to a 3rd way, and there's also another group that's a 4th way. So a 3rd way in this context really talks about the Buddhist path of the 3rd way, which I think for most of us Western white folks would be described as the middle way, or as the kind of the middle way. Let's put it that way. The in between of 2 extremes. So we're trying to balance. It's a balance. I'm just scanning the, yeah, you can access that Sutra circle. So Sutra is its own platform, its own software platform. And so you can sign up for Sutra and see what you can find on your own. You would need to get an invitation from one of the members of the Futuring Council in order to get into this particular circle. So Sutra is an online program, and it's also an app. So it's a learning management system, and it's really designed for organizations who want to do learning in intentional communities, who are kind of into circle process, who want to use circle process. So there's a question about what happens when we get to the north. So we all want to be in the north as men. That's where the healthy adult is. That's where the healthy king is. But yes, we do kind of enter the cycle, and those cycles will continue, and we'll find ourselves, organizations talk about being refounded. So there will come a time after this process, if we get to the north, a healthy north place, where things will feel like they're starting to die. There's a decline. And at that point, we'll need to kind of start the cycle again. Answering good questions in the chat room. I don't necessarily have the answers to all of them, particularly about the 3rd way, but thanks for your inputs there. I have a few more slides, and then we'll open it up to some more questions. All right, so the Futuring Council that I'm a member of is the council within Illumin that is essentially helping to hold the container for the body of Illumin in this process. What we really recommend is that you reread, men who are interested, reread and reflect on the We Are Open Circle Phase 1 report that was shared back in July that I pointed to in Sutra. Engage in this work of the West-North Passage. And then, just as for those men who are on the call who've been on an MROP, be prepared for the unexpected, and trust your guides. Trust Miriam and Adam. Trust the Futuring Council members. Trust me. and ask questions. Come to any of us with your questions and guides and anything like that. All right, I'm going to stop my sharing, and I'm going to invite any other members of the Futuring Council who are in this session right now to join me on the screen. I believe that there's space for a couple of more people to join. And I'll take questions. I see Tony's question about the issue of diversity in leadership. The fourth cycle of training that we're going to be doing over the next 8 months is directly around inclusion in the organization, and that's not going to be led by Miriam and Adam. Miriam and Adam are inviting in some equity partners that they've worked with before to help us in that particular phase of this work. So just to reiterate around Sutra, if you are interested in seeing and being involved in the large group trainings, in getting access to that initial phase 1 report, email me or reach out to the convener in your local chapter, and they will contact me, and I will invite you to that circle on Sutra called Inviting a Third Way, and then you can access that information. Are there any other questions? Questions, I'm typing my email back into the chat. So there's a question about how many per chapter. Is there a limit? I would say there is no limit for the large group training. We want as many men who are interested in service to the body of Illuman, to the organizational life of Illuman, not the organizational work of Illuman in the world. We want as many people as possible to participate in that. In the facilitator training program, there are limits to the numbers. That's only a small group of 16 people. There's a pretty interesting nomination process from within the councils that Miriam and Adam have brought that process to us to help us in this area of how men end up being invited to something, and I think it's a good step for us. But there is a limitation. About half of those 16 people are going to be nominated by the conveners in their nomination process. They will nominate, I think it's 1 or 2 people from the body of conveners themselves, and then there will be 5 or 6 regional representatives who will be nominated as facilitators. There's also going to be a BIPOC, Black Indigenous Person of Color, who's going to be that will be nominated as a facilitator, as well as a representative of our Spanish-speaking brothers. Okay, so Joe's saying he's having trouble figuring out how to join. Maybe he won't be able to join, but that's all right. Thanks for trying, brother. Robert, good question about patriarchy. And I would say Groups of men can be very dangerous with women and girls. I invite you to continue engagement with Illuman if you haven't yet, and you will see a tenderness among men that is rare in general society. And I would point you in particular to the expo. There is a video that Joe and his brother Nathan were involved in on that's called The Masculine Path to Healing. And it's the third big window that you can click through. It's about a 14-minute video. Watch that video and you'll see how we're trying to go about this. And you'll see the tenderness of the men involved as well. The other thing that I would say that is a caution to all of us who are kind of entering into this work is when we start talking about leadership and who gets to participate, who gets recommended, who's in charge, boy, that's all father wound stuff. That's all father wound stuff. So as individual men who are entering into this work, it's really important, if you're engaging in the service to Illuman in this way, to the body of Illuman, that you continue to do your own inner work, because your shadow will show up as well. Your shadow will show up. The 4 large trainings are not identical. Each of them has a different theme. The first one was power. The second one was conflict. The third one is going to be decision-making processes. And the fourth one is going to be inclusion and equity. Any other questions? All right, I'm going to close and ask us to center ourselves again and take a deep breath. And I want you to feel what part of your body exactly is speaking to you right now. Where do you feel it in your body? Try to breathe into that part of your body. And here is the waking. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I feel my fate in what I cannot fear. I learn by going where I have to go. We think by feeling. What is there to know? I hear my being dance from ear to ear. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Of those so close beside me, which are you? God bless the ground. I shall walk softly there and learn by going where I have to go. Light takes the tree. Light takes the tree. But who can tell us how? The lowly worm climbs up a winding stair. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. Great nature has another thing to do to you and me. So take the lively air, breathe deeply and lovely, learn by going where to go. This shaking keeps me steady. I should know. What falls away is always and is near. I wake to sleep and take my waking slow. I learn by going where I have to go. Oh, Thank you, brothers.